clear. If you can't beat them, sign them.
Jo Wilson reporting.
Jane, thanks very much. If a student tells a teacher that they want to change gender or even socially transition by changing their pronouns or name, that teacher will be expected to tell their parents unless there are exceptional circumstances. The government describes its new guidance for schools on trans issues as a parent-first approach and suggests it represents a sea change, with schools told they do not have to and should not accept all requests for social transition. This morning, the Minister for Women and Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, was asked whether there's a situation where the loopholes in this guidance still leave teachers with a lot of decisions.
What we are doing is making sure that for those schools who are very confused about what to do and are getting very bad advice from organisations like Stonewall, among others, understand what the government believes should be done. And this is based on legal. This is based on legal certainty. This is based on what the law says. So the guidance has 5 principles, and 2 of them are around understanding the legalities around safeguarding and also the legalities about biological sex and what a school's job is.
Well, the guidance is in draft form and is now open to consultation. Here's how it sums up its overarching principles, read by a producer.
In recent years, we have seen a significant increase in the number of children questioning the way they feel about being a boy or a girl, including their physical attributes of sex and the related ways in which they fit into society. This has been linked to gender identity ideology, the belief that a person can have a gender, whether male, female, or other, that is different to their biological sex. This is a contested belief.
It also makes clear that parents should be informed of any child's intention to change.
If a child requests a change, schools and colleges should make parents aware of the situation and can point them to support outside of the school environment if they request more information. The only exception to this is the very rare situation where informing parents might raise a significant risk of harm to the child.
When it comes to the use of pronouns, the guidance states that there will be few instances where changes will be allowed.
Schools and colleges should only agree to a change of pronouns if they are confident that the benefit to the individual child outweighs the impact on the school community. It is expected that there will be very few occasions in which a school or college will be able to agree to a change of pronouns. On these rare occasions, no teacher or pupil should be compelled to use these preferred pronouns, and it should not prevent teachers from referring to children collectively as girls or boys, even in the presence of a child that has been allowed to change their pronouns.
Well, what do teachers make of it? Jeff Barton is the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. I asked him how common it is for teachers to deal with students who are questioning their gender.
There's an interesting bit of evidence which comes from the Teacher Tap organisation who survey teachers. And what they said was around 75% of teachers teaching in secondary were dealing with an issue where a child had said, could you call me by a different name? Could you use a different pronoun? So that's quite a high proportion, 75%. But they also, when asked, do you feel confident about doing so? Over half said they don't feel confident in knowing what they say in response to that child. And that's why I think the guidance today is so important. So you can see, A, there is an issue in our schools and colleges of us needing some guidance, and B, the guidance finally coming today, which we will then have a look at to see if it's really going to help navigate through what we all know is difficult, complex series of issues.
Well, we now know what that teacher is supposed to do, which is to involve the parents, unless there are exceptional circumstances.
Exactly, and I think most people listening will think that people who choose to become teachers are, to use the Latin phrase, in loco parentis. So we've always been standing in place of parents. It would be remiss of us not to be involving parents unless there were a safeguarding concern, and that's always been in place anyway. But I think having that in black and white today is going to be helpful for the majority of people.
When you were flagging up what teachers say, the students are coming to them and saying, there was the line, but please don't tell my parents. And that now the teacher would have to come back straight away and say, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I have to. Is that your understanding?
I think it's probably slightly more nuanced than that. And the reality is that we always had some circumstances where a child was confiding in you something about what was happening at home or something going on with them, and you would be doing a kind of risk assessment about whether this was something you should involve the parent in or not. Now, those are always the minority of cases. I think there will still be some of those cases where you worry about the well-being of the child, and you will want, therefore, to try and get some specialist help to make a decision around that. But I do think that as a kind of starting point, of course parents should be involved in something like this, and the child will know that they're going to be involved. I think that is helpful.
But do you think what it will mean is, if the presumption is that the parent is immediately involved, that students will stop confiding in teachers who may often be the first adult they tell?
I think it will be the case that for some youngsters, knowing that there is a kind of default position that we will have to involve your parents in this, might deter them from talking to that adult in school. On the other hand, I go back to my previous point, we are in loco parentis, and therefore not to involve a parent in the main in that conversation, I think is more problematic.
Now, you mention the use of toilets, and that's fairly clear, the guidance in this. There are other issues, and I would flag up, for example, the use of pronouns, where the guidance says schools and colleges should only agree to a change of pronouns if they're confident the benefit to the individual outweighs the impact on the school community. It is expected there will be very few occasions in which a school or college will be able to agree to a change of pronouns. Now, children have certain rights, legal rights. And trans is a protected characteristic, although there's question marks over whether it applies to children. But do you think that there are cases as a result of this guidance where schools might be in danger of falling foul of the law?
Well, that's precisely one of the things we will want to look at. I'm a humble English teacher by background, so I don't know the answer to many of the implications in this. And what we will want to do is to have a look at that issue. Because, one of the problems is, what if teacher A is happy to recognise a child asking to be identified by a different pronoun, teacher B isn't? And underpinning all of this, Sarah, for me is, are we going to be on the right side of the law with all of this? Are there going to be accusations later on because we didn't conduct ourselves as the law would expect? Are we breaching equalities law? Frankly, I don't know that. All we want is to have guidance which has got a legal underpinning from government, and now we want the time actually to work through the implications, because many of the questions you're asking of me today are precisely as they hurtle into the end of term school and college leaders will be asking in the new year. That is when I hope we can bring some clarity to some of those issues.
OK, so what they will be working through this thinking, if I follow the guidance from government, might I be falling foul of the law?
I think so, and one would hope, wouldn't one, that any government guidance has got that very clear legal underpinning. But I know some of the groups who were involved in a kind of arms race of comments through newspapers and so on, that there will be people who will spook us by saying, actually, you will be breaching equalities law. There will be other people saying you should never, ever admit to a child that, yes, you will use a different name or a different pronoun. So let's just take a period of reflection and check all of that. The most important thing, I think, is we want our schools, our colleges to be kind of oases of humanity, doing the right thing for the youngster, involving the parent as appropriate, but also making sure there will be other people saying you should never, ever admit to a child that, yes, you will use a different name or a different pronoun. So let's just take a period of reflection and check all of that. The most important thing, I think, is we want our schools, our colleges to be kind of oases of humanity, doing the right thing for the youngster, involving the parent as appropriate, but also making sure we are cognizant of the wider society that we've got in our communities, both within the school and beyond it. I think today is actually a step towards greater clarity, and I think young people knowing that if I go and talk to a member of staff and I say I want to be identified by a different name, or I don't want to use the toilets I used to use before, they are going to be following the same guidance that would be used in any other school, rather than feeling, as they do at the moment, they're making it up as they go along. And I think ultimately that will be in the interest of the child, as well as the people I represent, school and college leaders.
Jeff Barton of the Association of School and College Leaders. Well, Joseph Navas is a lawyer at Britain and Time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You have acted for transgender adults in discrimination cases in the past. Do you think that there will be legal challenges over this guidance?
It's difficult to say, but I would certainly say that there's going to be litigation that comes from it. The individuals that are affected by it one way or another, I would expect to see complaints and then potentially litigation arising from that.
Right. What is your presumption, having read through the guidance, as to what sort of challenges there would be?
I mean, I think there's going to be complaints of direct discrimination because this guide is it's problematic in some senses, particularly in terms of refusal. There's no expectation that schools will use the preferred pronouns, which I think is one of the examples of where complaint is going to arise.
I mean, one of the things it sets out at the outset, and we played a clip of this voiced up, is that the belief that a person could have a gender, whether male, female or other, that's different to their biological sex, this is a contested belief. Is that accepted in law, or does that conflict with the protection that certainly trans adults have?
So trans adults, they can begin that process. They can go through the gender reassignment process upon reaching the age of 18 and obtaining that gender recognition certificate. Under the current law, children can't do that. They can't change their legal sex. So their legal sex is the same as their biological sex, and that obviously gives rise to these difficulties.
So they don't have the same rights in law?
They are protected by the Equality Act, but there is that. I mean, if you look at Scotland, for example, they tried to bring in this gender recognition bill to lower the age from 18 to 16 and change some other examples. The UK government blocked that from becoming law because of that inconsistency. They didn't want a situation where the law in Scotland is different from the law in England and Wales in these circumstances.
Now, Liz Truss, former Prime Minister, has said since this guidance has been published that trans activists will exploit loopholes, to use her phrase, in the new guidance. And she says it doesn't go far enough, and she wants legislation to make it clear that social transitioning is not recognised by schools or the state for under 18s. I imagine you're arguing from a different perspective, but is there a problem because this isn't clear enough?
I do think it needs to be clearer, this guidance. It's helpful in some senses. Your previous guest did make a very good point that it's helpful that children will know there is guidance being adopted across all schools. Schools shouldn't be making it up as they go along. But I do think there are still some gaps here. So I think the UK government do need to take this consultation period very seriously and try and address those gaps so that there aren't loopholes.
And it is the UK government, but of course it only applies to England. Scotland and Wales have different guidance or advice situation. Joseph Navas, thank you very much. Coming up on the programme, we get in the fist of